The morning Emily handed me her ultimatum, I was eating cereal and reading about a tech startup that had just sold for $50 million. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, a marketing director pulling down decent money, and my girlfriend was treating me like a personal ATM with insufficient funds. 3 days, Mark, she said, sliding a printed loan statement across my kitchen table like it was a legal document. My parents won't approve our engagement until you pay off my student debt. $47,000. 3 days. I looked up from my Lucky Charms. Yes, I'm 30 and still eat kids' cereal. Sue me. And studied Emily's face. She had that practiced expression I'd seen her use with difficult clients at her accounting firm. Professional. Unyielding. Completely devoid of the warmth that had supposedly made me fall in love with her 2 years ago. Let me get this straight, I said, setting down my spoon with deliberate calm. Your parents, who drive matching BMWs and live in a house bigger than my entire office building, want me to pay off debt you accumulated getting your degree so you could land your $60,000 a year job? It's about responsibility, Mark. About showing commitment to our future. Whose future? Because last I checked, marriage was supposed to be about love, not a financial stress test designed by people who think my job in marketing is somehow beneath their precious daughter. Emily's jaw tightened. She hated when I got sarcastic, which was unfortunate because sarcasm was my default setting when dealing with unreasonable people. In the Carter family, Emily's parents and her spoiled brother Kyle had elevated unreasonableness to an art form. My parents just want to make sure you're serious about this relationship. Serious enough to liquidate my entire savings account, apparently? I pushed the loan statement back toward her. What happens if I don't pay it? Then we're done. The words hung in the air between us like smoke from a house fire. Emily sat there perfectly composed in her navy business suit, waiting for me to cave. This was supposed to be the moment where I panicked, where I begged, where I promised to find the money somehow because losing her would destroy me. Instead, I started laughing. You know what's funny? I said, standing up to rinse my bowl in the sink. I've been killing myself trying to impress your family for 2 years, wearing the right clothes to their dinner parties, pretending to care about their golf stories, listening to your father explain how kids these days don't understand real work. And this whole time, they were just waiting for the right moment to price me out. That's not 3 days, I interrupted, turning to face her. You couldn't even give me a week. It's like you want me to fail. Emily's composure cracked slightly. I want you to prove that you love me enough to do whatever it takes. No, you want me to prove I'm desperate enough to bankrupt myself for the privilege of joining a family that's never respected me. There's a difference. I grabbed my jacket and keys from the counter. Emily watched me with growing alarm as I headed for the door. Where are you going? To work. Some of us have jobs that don't come with trust funds as backup. Mark, wait. But I was already gone, leaving her sitting at my kitchen table with her ultimatum and her $47,000 delusion. The drive to my office gave me time to think, which was dangerous because my thoughts were trending toward the nuclear option. By the time I reached the downtown building that housed Dalton Marketing Solutions, I had mentally drafted my resignation letter, calculated my savings account balance, and started planning what my life might look like without Emily Carter in it. The answer, surprisingly, felt like freedom. You look like someone stole your lunch money, said Sarah Mitchell, my colleague and the closest thing I had to a friend at work. She was standing by the coffee machine, looking effortlessly put together in a way that made Emily's calculated perfection seem exhausting by comparison. Worse, my girlfriend tried to steal my life savings. Sarah raised an eyebrow. That sounds like a story that requires caffeine and details. I poured myself a cup of coffee that could strip paint and gave her the abbreviated version of my morning. Sarah listened without interrupting, occasionally making small noises of disbelief that made me feel less crazy for being offended by Emily's demand. So, let me understand this, Sarah said when I finished. Emily's parents, who could probably pay off her loans with their wine budget, want you to drain your savings to prove your worthiness to marry into their family? That's the gist of it. And if you don't pay, she's going to break up with you? Apparently. Sarah leaned against the counter, studying me with those sharp green eyes that never missed anything. Can I ask you something? And I want you to really think about your answer. Shoot. If Emily walked away tomorrow, would you miss her, or would you miss the idea of her? The question hit me like a slap. I opened my mouth to say, of course I'd miss her, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I found myself thinking about the last 6 months of our relationship. The constant criticism disguised as helpful suggestions, the way she'd started scheduling our dates around her parents' social calendar, the growing sense that I was auditioning for a role I wasn't sure I wanted anymore. That's what I thought, Sarah said quietly. I didn't say anything. You didn't have to. Your face said it all. She touched my arm briefly. Mark, I've watched you tie yourself in knots trying to make Emily happy for 2 years. You've changed everything about yourself except your DNA, and it's still not enough. Maybe it's time to ask yourself why you're fighting so hard to stay in a relationship that makes you miserable. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Emily. We need to talk. Come to my parents' house after work. They want to discuss the situation. I showed the message to Sarah, who rolled her eyes so hard I was surprised she didn't strain something. Let me guess. Family meeting? Looks like it. Are you going? I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Yeah, I'm going, but not for the reason they think. The Carter family mansion sat on 2 acres of manicured lawn in Wesley's most exclusive neighborhood. I'd been there dozens of times, but tonight it felt different. Tonight, I wasn't coming as Emily's hopeful boyfriend, trying to win over her parents. Tonight, I was coming as someone who had finally figured out the game they'd been playing. Emily answered the door wearing a dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Thank you for coming, she said, like I was doing her a favor instead of walking into what felt increasingly like an ambush. Wouldn't miss it. Her parents were waiting in the living room that looked like something out of Architectural Digest. Richard Carter, Emily's father, was a tall man with silver hair and the kind of handshake that was supposed to intimidate. Margaret Carter, her mother, had perfected the art of smiling without warmth. Kyle, Emily's 26-year-old brother, who still lived at home and worked for his father's real estate company, was sprawled in an armchair looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Mark, Richard said, standing to shake my hand. Good of you to come, please, sit down. I chose the chair directly across from him, close enough to maintain eye contact, but far enough away to avoid feeling cornered. Emily perched on the edge of the sofa next to her mother, hands folded in her lap like a well-behaved child. Emily tells us you're having some concerns about the loan situation, Margaret began, her voice dripping with the kind of false sympathy that made my teeth itch. I'm having concerns about a lot of things, actually. Richard leaned forward slightly. Such as? Such as why a family that spends more on landscaping than most people make in a year is suddenly concerned about their daughter's student debt. The temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees. Kyle snorted with amusement until his father silenced him with a look. It's not about the money, Richard said carefully. It's about commitment, about proving that you're willing to sacrifice for Emily's future. Whose future exactly? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like I'd be sacrificing my future to subsidize hers. That's not fair, Emily protested. We're supposed to be a team. Teams work together toward common goals. They don't issue ultimatums with 3-day deadlines. Margaret cleared her throat delicately. Mark, dear, I think you're misunderstanding our intentions. We simply want to ensure that Emily is with someone who can provide for her properly. Provide for her? She has a job, a good one. She's perfectly capable of paying off her own loans. But marriage is about partnership, Richard said, about shared responsibility. You're right, it is. I stood up, suddenly tired of the whole charade. Which is why I've decided not to pay Emily's debt. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily's face went pale, then red, then pale again. Her parents looked like I just announced my intention to burn down their house. Excuse me? Emily whispered. You heard me. I'm not paying your student loans. Not in 3 days, not in 3 years, not ever. But if you don't pay them, we're over. I looked around the room at these people who had spent 2 years making me feel inadequate, who had turned my relationship into a series of tests and hoops to jump through, who were now demanding I prove my love with a bank transfer. Then I guess we're over. Emily started crying. Not the pretty, delicate tears she used when she wanted sympathy, but ugly, shocked sobs that made her makeup run. Margaret rushed to comfort her while Richard stood up, his face dark with anger. "You're making a mistake, son." "No," I said, heading for the door. "I'm correcting one." Kyle followed me outside, which surprised me. We'd never been particularly close, mainly because he treated me like an unwelcome guest at his own family gatherings. "That was brutal," he said, and for the first time since I'd known him, he sounded almost impressed. "Your sister gave me an ultimatum. I chose my response. She's going to lose her mind, you know. She was already planning the wedding in her head. Then she should have thought about that before trying to extort me." Kyle laughed, a sharp sound in the evening air. "You know what's funny? I actually respect you more now than I have in 2 years. Thanks, I think. For what it's worth, you're better off without her. Emily's been spoiled rotten since birth. She honestly believed you'd pay just to keep her around." "What do you believe?" Kyle shrugged. "I believe my family underestimated you, and I believe you just made things very interesting." He was right about that. By the time I got home, my phone was buzzing with texts and missed calls. Emily, her parents, even some of our mutual friends who had apparently already heard about the breakup. I ignored them all and poured myself a drink, sitting in my suddenly quiet apartment and marveling at how peaceful it felt. The next morning brought a new round of drama. Emily had apparently spent the night calling everyone we knew, spinning the story to make me look like the villain. According to her version of events, I had cruelly abandoned her in her time of need, choosing money over love. "Is it true?" asked Derek, my best friend since college, when he called during my lunch break. "Did you really dump Emily because she asked you to help with her student loans? Is that what she told you? She said you refused to help her when she needed it most, that you chose your savings account over your relationship." I gave Derek the real story, including the 3-day ultimatum and the family meeting. By the time I finished, he was swearing creatively. "Dude, that's not asking for help, that's financial extortion. Try explaining that to our friends. Half of them think I'm a heartless bastard. The half that matter will figure it out. The rest weren't really your friends anyway." Derek was optimistic, but he underestimated Emily's talent for manipulation. Over the next few days, I watched my social circle divide into camps. There were the people who knew me well enough to question Emily's version of events, and there were the people who had always been more her friends than mine. The second group was larger and more vocal. It started with subtle things, invitations that stopped coming, plans that got made without me, conversations that ended when I walked into a room. Then it escalated. "I can't believe you're being so selfish," said Jennifer Walsh, a friend from our weekly trivia group, when she cornered me at the grocery store. "Emily is devastated. She really thought you loved her." I did love her. But love doesn't mean bankrupting yourself to satisfy someone else's arbitrary demands. "It was $47,000, Mark. That's nothing compared to a lifetime of happiness." Easy to say when it's not your $47,000. Jennifer looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "You're really going to throw away 2 years over money?" "I'm not the one who made this about money." But Jennifer had already walked away, shaking her head in disgust. It was a scene that repeated itself over the following weeks with depressing regularity. Emily had positioned herself as the victim of my greed, and people were buying it. The breaking point came 3 weeks after the breakup, at Tom Bradley's birthday party. Tom had been a friend since high school, and I thought our relationship was solid enough to survive the Emily drama. I was wrong. The party was at Tom's house, a modest place in the suburbs that he shared with his wife, Lisa. I arrived fashionably late, hoping to avoid any awkwardness, but the moment I walked through the door, the conversation died. Emily was there. She was standing by the kitchen island, surrounded by a cluster of our former mutual friends, looking beautiful and tragic in a black dress that probably cost more than my car payment. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears, and she pressed a hand to her chest like my mere presence was causing her physical pain. "Mark," Tom said, appearing at my elbow with the expression of someone who had just realized he'd invited both halves of a divorced couple to the same event. "I didn't think you'd actually come." It's your birthday. Why wouldn't I come? Well, given the situation with Emily, what situation? We broke up. People break up all the time. But Tom was already steering me toward the back patio, away from Emily and her audience. Look, man, I think it might be better if you left. I stopped walking. Excuse me? This is really hard for Emily. She's been through enough without having to see you tonight. She's been through enough? Tom, do you even know what actually happened between us? I know you dumped her when she needed your help the most. I know she's been crying for 3 weeks straight. And I know that having both of you here is going to ruin my party. The casual dismissal in his voice hit me like a physical blow. This was someone I'd known for 15 years. Someone I'd helped move apartments and celebrated promotions with. Someone I'd considered a real friend. And he was choosing Emily's version of events over our history. So you want me to leave? I think it would be best for everyone. I looked around the patio at the other guests, all of whom were suddenly very interested in their drinks. These were people I'd known for years, people I'd shared birthdays and holidays and major life events with, and not one of them was meeting my eyes. Fine, I said. But Tom, when you find out the truth about what really happened, don't bother calling me to apologize. I left the party and drove home in a rage that made my hands shake on the steering wheel. It wasn't just about losing Emily anymore. It was about losing an entire social network to her lies and manipulations. It was about watching people I'd trusted choose her sob story over my character. By the time I reached my apartment, the rage had crystallized into something colder and more focused. Emily wanted to play victim. She wanted to destroy my reputation while preserving her own. Fine. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated me. The next morning, I called in sick to work and spent the day researching. Emily had always been careless with her social media, posting constantly about her life and opinions. I scrolled through 2 years of her Instagram and Facebook posts, looking for ammunition. What I found was better than I'd hoped. Emily had a pattern of talking about money in ways that contradicted her current narrative. Posts about expensive shopping trips, complaints about having to pay her own bills, jokes about finding a man to take care of her financially. There were also posts about her family's wealth, including photos of their house, cars, and vacation destinations that clearly showed they could afford to pay her loans without breaking a sweat. But the real goldmine was in her private messages, which she'd carelessly left logged in on my laptop months ago. I'd never snooped before, partly out of respect, partly because I hadn't wanted to know what I might find. Now, I was glad for my former restraint, because the messages painted a very different picture of our relationship than the one she'd been selling to our friends. There were conversations with her college roommate, where Emily complained about having to pretend to be interested in my hobbies. Messages with her brother where she joked about training me to be more suitable for her family. Most damning of all, there was a recent exchange with her mother, where they discussed the loan ultimatum as a strategy to test his commitment level and see how far we can push him. It wasn't about the money. It had never been about the money. It was about control, about seeing if they could make me dance to their tune. The loan was just the excuse they'd chosen to put me in my place. I screenshot everything, organized it into folders, and started planning my counterattack. The first phase was subtle. I began commenting on Emily's social media posts, not arguing or being confrontational, but asking innocent questions that highlighted the contradictions in her story. When she posted about being financially devastated by her student loans, I commented with a link to a photo she'd posted the week before of a $300 handbag she'd bought. When she talked about how hard it was to make ends meet, I reminded her followers about her recent vacation to the Bahamas. Emily deleted my comments and blocked me, but not before other people had seen them. Seeds of doubt were planted. The second phase was more direct. I created a blog post titled, "The Real Story," and laid out the facts of our breakup, complete with screenshots of Emily's messages and social media posts. I didn't name names, but I didn't have to. Anyone who knew us would recognize the details. The post went viral within our social circle. People shared it, commented on it, dissected every detail. Emily's carefully constructed victim narrative began to crumble as the evidence of her manipulation became impossible to ignore. Tom called me 2 days after the post went live. Jesus Christ, Mark, is this stuff real? Every screenshot, every message, every detail. She really said those things about you? About training you? She really did. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I owe you an apology. Yes, you do. I'm sorry, man. I should have known better. I should have listened to your side before I kicked you out of my party. Yes, you should have. Are we okay? I considered the question. Tom had chosen to believe the worst about me without giving me a chance to defend myself. He'd prioritized avoiding conflict over supporting a friend. That wasn't something I could just forget. We're not enemies, I said finally, but we're not the same kind of friends we used to be. Tom accepted that, which was more than some people did. As Emily's lies unraveled, the people who had shunned me fell into two camps. Those who admitted they'd been wrong and tried to make amends, and those who doubled down on their original positions rather than admit they'd been fooled. Jennifer Walsh was in the second camp. When she ran into me at the coffee shop near my office, she was still defending Emily. Even if she said those things, you didn't have to humiliate her publicly, she said, blocking my path to the counter. You could have handled this privately, like she handled our breakup privately. She was hurt and confused. She needed support from her friends. She needed support built on lies about what I'd done. Jennifer's face flushed. You're being vindictive. I'm being honest. There's a difference. You've destroyed her reputation over a misunderstanding. I've corrected the record after she destroyed mine with deliberate lies. Jennifer stared at me like I was a stranger. I don't even recognize you anymore. Good. The person you thought you recognized was a doormat who let people walk all over him. I'm not that person anymore. She left without another word, and I realized I didn't care. The old Mark would have felt guilty about the confrontation, would have wondered if maybe he was being too harsh. The new Mark understood that some people were determined to misunderstand the situation, and trying to convince them was a waste of energy. Emily, meanwhile, had gone into full damage control mode. She deleted most of her social media accounts and started telling people that I had hacked her messages and violated her privacy. It was a desperate move that only made her look worse, especially since several people pointed out that she'd been perfectly happy to violate my privacy when she was spreading lies about our breakup. The final confrontation came 6 weeks after our breakup at a charity fundraiser downtown. It was one of those events where half the city's professional class showed up to be seen supporting a good cause. I hadn't planned to go, but Sarah from work had convinced me that hiding at home would only make me look guilty. You need to get back out there, she'd said. Show people that you're not ashamed of what you did. I'm not ashamed, I'm tired. Then show them that too. Show them that you're moving on with your life while Emily is still wallowing in the mess she created. Sarah was right, as usual. She'd become a good friend over the past few weeks, one of the few people who had supported me from the beginning. We'd started spending more time together outside of work, and I was beginning to realize that my feelings for her were more than just friendship. The fundraiser was being held at the Marriott downtown, in a ballroom decorated with enough flowers to stock a funeral home. I arrived with Sarah, who looked stunning in a blue dress that made her eyes sparkle. We made our way through the crowd, stopping to chat with colleagues and acquaintances, and I was pleased to discover that most people were treating me normally. The blog post had done its job. Then I saw Emily. She was standing near the bar with her parents and Kyle, wearing a red dress that was probably designed to remind me what I was missing. When our eyes met across the room, she lifted her chin defiantly, like she was daring me to approach. I was happy to oblige. Emily, I said, walking over with Sarah at my side. Richard, Margaret, Kyle, how nice to see you all. The temperature around the bar dropped noticeably. Richard looked like he wanted to punch me, while Margaret clutched her purse like I might try to steal it. Kyle, surprisingly, nodded at me with something that might have been respect. Mark, Emily said, her voice carefully controlled. I'm surprised to see you here. It's a charity event. I believe in supporting good causes. Some causes are better than others. True, I've become particularly interested in organizations that help people recognize manipulation and emotional abuse. Emily's composure cracked slightly. You have some nerve showing up here with her, she said, gesturing at Sarah. After everything you put me through. Everything I put you through? Emily, You gave me a 3-day ultimatum to pay your debt or lose you forever. I chose to lose you. That's not something I did to you. That's something you did to yourself. You humiliated me in front of everyone we know. I told the truth after you spent 3 weeks lying about what happened between us. Richard stepped forward, his face red with anger. You had no right to share private conversations. Your daughter had no right to destroy my reputation with lies. But she did it anyway, so I corrected the record. You violated her privacy. She violated our relationship when she tried to extort money from me. Margaret spoke up for the first time, her voice shaking with indignation. We only wanted what was best for Emily. No, you wanted to see if you could make me dance when you pulled the strings. Well, congratulations. You found out. A crowd was starting to gather around us, drawn by the raised voices and obvious tension. I could see people pulling out their phones, ready to record whatever happened next. Emily noticed too, and her face went pale. Please, she said quietly, can we not do this here? Do what? Have an honest conversation? I thought you liked public forums. You certainly enjoyed using them to spread lies about me. I never lied. You told everyone I dumped you because you asked for help with your student loans. You left out the part about the 3-day ultimatum, the family meeting where your parents treated me like a servant, and the messages where you joked about training me to be more suitable for your family. Emily's face went from pale to red. You had no right to read those messages. You had no right to send them. But you did. And now everyone knows exactly what kind of person you really are. Stop, Emily said, tears starting to flow. Please just stop. I stopped 3 weeks ago. You're the one who kept going, who kept lying, who kept trying to make me the villain in your story. Well, here's the ending you didn't see coming. I'm not the villain, and I'm not the victim. I'm the guy who figured out the game and chose not to play. I turned to leave, but Kyle's voice stopped me. Wait. I looked back at him, surprised. For what it's worth, he said, ignoring his family's shocked stares. You were right about all of it. Emily's been spoiled her whole life, and my parents enabled it. What they did to you was wrong. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily looked like she'd been slapped, while her parents stared at their son in horror. Kyle, Richard said warningly. No, Dad, someone needs to say it. We treated Mark like garbage, and when he finally stood up for himself, we acted like he was the problem. Well, he wasn't the problem. We were. Kyle looked directly at me. I'm sorry. For all of it. I nodded at him, genuinely surprised by his honesty. Thank you. Then I walked away, leaving the Carter family to deal with the wreckage of their own making. Sarah and I left the fundraiser early and went to a quiet bar downtown. We found a corner booth and ordered drinks, finally able to relax after the confrontation. That was intense, Sarah said, sipping her wine. That was overdue. How do you feel? I considered the question. Free. For the first time in 2 years, I feel completely free. Sarah smiled. Good. You deserve to feel that way. Thank you. For everything. For supporting me when everyone else was ready to write me off. For encouraging me to fight back. For being there tonight. You don't have to thank me. That's what friends do. Is that what we are? Friends? Sarah's smile became something warmer and more complicated. I was hoping we might be something more than that. I reached across the table and took her hand. I was hoping the same thing. We talked until the bar closed, about everything and nothing, about the future we might build together now that I was free from the toxic relationship that had been holding me back. For the first time in months, I felt genuinely happy. The aftermath of the charity event confrontation was swift and decisive. Video of our argument had been posted online within hours, and by the next morning, it was clear that public opinion had shifted decisively in my favor. Emily's attempt to play the victim had backfired spectacularly when confronted with the evidence of her manipulation. More importantly, I discovered that I didn't care about public opinion anymore. I'd learned to distinguish between people whose respect was worth having and people whose opinions were worthless. Emily and her enablers fell squarely into the second category. 6 months later, I was promoted to senior marketing director at a salary that would have made Emily's $47,000 demand look even more ridiculous than it already had. Sarah and I were officially dating, and I was happier than I'd been in years. I ran into Emily one last time at the grocery store on a random Tuesday evening. She looked tired and older, like the stress of the past few months had aged her prematurely. We nodded at each other politely but didn't speak. As I watched her walk away, I felt something I hadn't expected: pity. Emily had been raised to believe that her wants and needs should always come first, that other people existed to serve her interests, that love could be bought and sold like any other commodity. Those beliefs had cost her more than she'd probably ever realized. But that was her problem to solve, not mine. I went home to Sarah, to my promotion, to my life free from ultimatums and manipulations, and people who thought my love could be purchased for the right price. It was a good life, built on honesty instead of lies, respect instead of control, genuine affection instead of calculated transactions. Emily had tried to make me choose between my money and my dignity. In the end, I'd chosen both, and discovered that some things, like self-respect and real love, were worth more than any price tag someone else might try to put on them. The art of losing everything I'd learned was really the art of discovering what you'd never actually had in the first place. And sometimes, that discovery was the best thing that could happen to you.